I'm Bambi Francisco with Vator TV, the network for innovators. Well, on Twitter, you never feel alone. It's like constant people watching. Well, joining me to talk about Twitter and how it's changing online culture and the way consumers are behaving and people are behaving is Jack Dorsey. He's the CEO and co-founder of Twitter. Jack, thanks for joining me again.
Thank you, Ben.
So your co-founder, Evan Williams, said, I've been trying to explain Twitter for a couple of years now. I read that somewhere. So how has your explanation of Twitter changed over the years as you've watched how people have used your site?
It's changed, well, it's changed in pretty dramatic ways. And it changes day by day, because the interesting thing about it is it's very different things to very different people, and everyone uses it in a different way. Mm-hmm. And that usage changes over time for that individual.
What was it initially when you first launched it?
Well, so my background is in dispatch. I spent the past 15 years writing dispatch software, couriers, taxis, 911. And you have all these, people roaming about a metropolis, constantly reporting what they're doing, what they're working on, what patient is going to the emergency ward. And I just found this fascinating because you get this beautiful picture of what's going on in the city. And the city for me was Manhattan, and there's a lot going on in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I always wanted that for my friends. I wanted to know what's going on with my friends, this ambient social awareness of what's happening. So that was the original idea, and that was reinforced by IM. You were just talking about before this interview, looking at your buddy list and seeing the away message and how people use that.
Right.
And at a glance, you could see what your friends were listening to, what they're reading, what they're working on. But the problem was you couldn't get away from the keyboard. You had to update it from your computer.
And you had to know the people. You couldn't follow what other people were doing. They would have to actually just ping you. It wasn't one-to-many back then with IM.
Yeah. So I mean, SMS came on the scene, and the common usage for that was this one-to-one social awareness. Like, what are you doing tonight?
Yeah.
How are you feeling? So mixing those two metaphors and those concepts together was the original impetus of Twitter, and that's how it began. So you could be anywhere, you could send out a message, and it would tell you all your friends what you're doing, and it would have that context, and it would make the world feel smaller through this constant awareness of what's going on right now with your friends. And it's more or less maintained that vision in that application, but it's added some new functionality. Like we were talking about in the previous interview, someone hooking up a plant, and news feeds getting on, and entities like JetBlue getting on, and people are using it in a pragmatic fashion and using it as a game. There's a Tamagotchi service on Twitter, so there's all these different usages, but at its core, it really comes down to kind of this personal newswire feel of what's going on with the things you're interested in. Yeah.
So, I was thinking, as I've been on Twitter a lot, and I've become an addict, and I'm surprised, but I when I've been on Twitter, especially watching it on IM, I have this feeling that I'm sitting in the cafe in New York City. I used to live in New York City, and it's like you love people watching and be just kind of observing. Yeah. And I was sitting there last night just observing people on Twitter, and I thought, well, this is kind of a new way to observe people. So what are you how is Twitter changing the way people are, I guess, socializing? I guess that's a form of socializing, but what have you seen? What else have you seen?
It's really, from my vantage point, it's lowering the barrier to entry for really sharing small details of life. So people are a lot more comfortable because of the constraints we put on the messaging, 140 characters. You can't really say a lot. The canvas size is very, very small. And with that constraint, the messages are more off the cuff and in the moment. And you share things that are more or less considered inconsequential. I'm not going to go up to the street, go up to you on the street and say, I just had a cheese sandwich for lunch. Right. But I would say that on Twitter because I know that you might be interested in it, and if you are interested in it, that you'll follow me.
Right.
If, say, you were my mom, and my mom saw that I was eating a cheese sandwich for lunch, she would instantly be brought back to my childhood or whatnot. So there's a lot of different contexts that the recipient brings to the messaging, and that's what I've seen change the most. Is people come on the system and they start learning how to use the technology, and we do this with every technology.
Right.
At first, they report everything. They
Right.
report when they're eating, when they're going to the bathroom, going to the supermarket,
Yeah.
whatever. They get kind of crazy, and then they kind of dial it back, and they understand how people are viewing it, and they understand what's valuable
How
to
to
them.
use it. Yeah. So what's the it's funny. I do more. I guess I'm more the voyeur. I'm not really broadcasting. And I wonder what's the motivation behind people broadcasting. I've had this argument with my husband, and I'm like, well, that's good. You really want to reach out to somebody who's doing something at the same exact time or whatever. It's why, is it because people inherently want to be acknowledged?
Well, I
Or
think
you want to meet someone new, or you want to find somebody who's at that moment doing the same exact thing, eating a cheese sandwich and something.
I think you see this when, if you see anyone on Twitter go out for the evening or go on vacation or have a new experience, they tend to send a lot more updates because I feel they want to maintain that connection. And they know that their friends are listening, and they know that they have a known quantity, and they're exploring this new world and this new dimension. I went to Barcelona not too long ago, and I was updating like crazy because I was exploring all this really exciting stuff,
Right.
and I wanted to share it with the people I know and the people I care about.
Real time.
And at the same time, I wanted them to come with me and to be there. And
Right.
I think that's really important. And I think with the technology that we've helped create, it's the barrier to entry is so low that it's so easy to do that.
Right.
That you just don't think about it. And
Right.
you naturally throw it over the fence, basically.
The thing about the barrier to entry that you mentioned, it's funny because people are actually they're less inhibited, because they only have to do 140 characters,
Right.
and you could grammatically you could be off, and you don't
Right.
have to.
And many are.
And many are, but they don't care. It's only 140
Right.
characters, so they're
Right.
not intimidated.
Right.
So, what are some of the most interesting use cases? I know there's been so many that have been pretty famous, like the guy from Egypt, and but anything else that's been really interesting?
There's three that stick out in my mind. The first one is you'll be familiar with whenever we have an earthquake in San Francisco. So whenever anyone feels a bump in San Francisco, they tend to take out their phone or get on the web and immediately say, "Oh my God, an earthquake!"
Yeah.
And it either persists and they find out that this gossip becomes fact and it actually is an earthquake,
Yeah.
or it just dies down and it happened to be a truck rolling by. So that's really experience. These massively shared experiences
Yeah.
that happen on Twitter are
Right.
extremely engaging.
You can see how all of different people are experiencing them. That's nice.
And we see these spikes in traffic for events like that. My friend Tony has a really interesting usage. He actually updates with where he parked in a garage.
Okay.
So he'll send an update like, I parked in 5B, or I parked on the blue level. And it's interesting from many levels because the act of writing something down helps you remember, but also he's kind of...
Oh, is it to help him remember?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yes. It's kind of
like that.
giving the information to his friends, so they're helping him to remember.
Okay.
It's really interesting, and he does this all the time. And then the third one is at 5 p.m. Pacific time on the public timeline. We used to see all these Japanese cats and little Japanese updates. We had no idea what was going on, so we did some research, and we found that there was a web page that you could go to, and you would sign up, and they would create a cat, and they would create a cat on Twitter. And this thing was actually a Tamagotchi, a virtual pet. And the virtual pet, this cat, would tell you when it's hungry or when it's tired, when it needs to go outside, and you could send a direct message to pet it and to feed it.
Okay.
So all these people in Japan were following their friends, but they were also following 2 or 3 virtual pets. So you have this toy application on the system as well. And I always found that fascinating. I'd love to see.
It's fascinating
more
just
of
how
those.
people just use your platform.
Yeah.
for various things. What you talked about your friend sort of typing in what I'm parked here, and it scares me. Like I think about stalkers. I mean, I'm stalking you, I'm following you now, so and I would know every little thing. Like how do you? I don't know if you're supposed to protect people on the site, but that's got to be some concern. I mean, there's got to be. How do you think about security issues and privacy issues?
That's another. We consider this to be a new technology, and with any new technology, you learn, you come to this understanding of how it fits into your life.
Yeah.
And people, like I said earlier, tend to start out by broadcasting everything.
Yeah.
And then, potentially they have a really good experience or they have a not so good experience. And that tunes and that sets the tone for the rest of their updates. So for myself, I like providing a lot of context. I don't necessarily provide specific locations because if I say, I'm at a Starbucks at 5th and Broadway, that's an open invitation for anyone to come by and talk to me. If I say I'm having coffee, that provides some context. People understand what I'm doing, but they don't understand, specifically where I am. So I think one of the things we can help do is to really expose that learning curve and make people very aware of what this technology means for the life and how best to use it. And I'm not really sure how we do that yet. But it's something we have to think about as we curate this technology.
Well, as you talked about exposing, so first, what kind of data are you collecting about people?
We don't collect that much data. We save everyone's updates as a matter of convenience. So that I use the system as a journal.
Can they delete those updates?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's basically the owner of that data is really the
Yeah. I mean,
people.
You can delete your updates. You can delete individual updates. You can delete your account.
Okay.
You can restore your account. You can also set your account to protected, which means that you have to approve everyone who follows you. And
you can approve people who follow you?
Yeah.
So you can kick somebody off and not.
You can block people.
Okay.
So
I didn't know that.
as we see more and more opportunity to make people feel more comfortable with creating content like this, then
Well,
we
you're
make it more convenient.
collecting data about, you would know your person, your friend, and you would know where he is and where he's roaming about and what bars he visits or the places he goes to, what countries he goes to. I mean, you don't capture any of that stuff.
Well, I mean, people can fill out their profiles. They can fill out their username and their name and their current location, and that's all visible on the site. And it's all up to the user. So that's the approach we're taking is to really have the final say be in the user's court as to how much information they want out there. Otherwise, we don't collect much, and we certainly don't do much with it.
Do you consider yourself a social network?
No. You can build a social network on top of us, but we consider ourselves more as a communications utility. We're focused on this concept of status and updates. We think that these updates spark conversation, and they tend to expose trends, which is another reason we bought Semize, is because you can expose a lot of interesting trends with a real-time search engine. But a social network is on top of that. So a social network is basically just a filter. So we're building this repository of state, and you choose, like, I want to follow Bambi, and I want to follow John, and I want to follow Biz, and I want to follow Ev, and that's more or less my social network. But really, when you get down to it, it's just a filter. You're filtering out all the other stuff, and you're picking what you want to come in.
Can I ping you and say, hey, follow me? And if not, why did you determine not to allow that?
You can @reply me, which is a way to direct a message in public
and say, hey, follow me. Yeah, but why'd you make it so difficult? Not many people know you can @reply. I mean, I know you can do that, but
so that's part of our big challenge is to really streamline the user experience.
Okay.
And the user experience is, to be perfectly frank, is pretty terrible right now. We're not happy with it. We have a long way to go to make it feel a lot better and to make it more intuitive. And we're spending a lot of time doing that.
I think it's pretty good.
It's simple, but it could be less obtuse. And we hired our co-founder Evan Williams took a full-time role as a chief product officer, and he is tasked with with making
Changing
the
that.
product easy to understand and really taking it
It's
to
pretty easy to understand. It's pretty simple. You got a box and 140 characters. How do you moderate or censor the data, or do you do that at all?
Ideally, we allow, we want users to do that as well. We've built in tools to block. The system itself is completely recipient controlled, so you choose who to follow, and you choose, when you want to leave them, if you want to leave them.
Sure.
So there are cases when we have to take action.
Like what, for example?
Well, when someone is potentially, being abusive, and that there's varying definitions of that. But we have to take everything on a case-by-case basis. But ideally, every community, I think, wants to more or less veer towards the side of self-policing.
Sure.
But we don't really see ourselves as a community or a social network. We see ourselves as an infrastructure carrying messages.
Right. So whatever message you carry.
Right. But some people will abuse that technology, and it's not helpful for anyone. But it's something that we continue to learn. And something that we have a lot of work to do, and it's another big charge for us.
Let's talk about the search, because I found it so fascinating. So I wrote a piece about what next Twitter ego searches. As soon as I heard about the Surmise acquisition, I just looked at your Twitter search, which I think is great. Yep. Instantly plugged in Vator and did my own name and said, wow, this person's talking about Vator, or this person's talking about me. I typed in your name, and I just thought, wow, it's just. What's amazing is that Google searches are just so stale now, and you can either do blog searches, but they're not even real time. This is real time, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating new way to retrieve information, and a fascinating way that consumers will be searching. Right? How are you changing the search paradigm, or how people are searching?
Well, I see it more as not searching per se, but filtering. Like we have this giant corpus of activity going on in the network, and there are ways to filter that down to something that's meaningful. You're interested in what's going on with what people are saying about you or with Vator, so you're filtering out all that other information and just getting to the core information. So I think that's really interesting, because it allows you to get to the heart of the matter very quickly, and get people's opinions on something in real time. And it's not just the real-time aspect that does that, it's also the constraint of 140 characters. So as I was saying before, it's the updates tend to be off the cuff and of the moment, and people say what they mean because there's not a lot of room.
Yeah.
And every word has weight and has some strength, and could almost be considered a keyword. So it makes filtering and searching that much more interesting.
What do you think? How do you think people are going to be using your search engine next year?
On the go. I think people will be out, and they'll be interacting with something new, and they'll be looking for answers to questions. They'll be looking for other people in the area.
So will it be only limited to the people that you're following or following you, or will it be open?
So the interesting thing is, there are a lot of users on our system that have, say, over 10,000 followers, and they ask questions. Like they go into a store and they say, should I buy the Nokia N95?
Sure.
And they get immediate answers, and they're very valuable answers. But someone signing up to Twitter who has
no friends,
3 followers maybe, or 10 updaters, doesn't have that same ability to get those questions answered. And when you have that ability, it feels like a superpower a bit. This is something that Ev was mentioning the other day. It feels really good to be able to tap into that real-time network of what's going on right now. So making that easier through this filtering technology, without having this necessary number of followers.
Sort of true, like almost social search that everybody's been trying to achieve.
Right.
In a different way. So one last question about the 140 characters that you keep touching on. It used to be, I've been a journalist for a long time, and with the search engines, they've really changed the way I have to write headlines. And with these 140 characters, or just the way friend feed or Twitter works, and when I Twitter, I have to be really good and pithy about my headlines if I want somebody to click onto my story.
Yeah.
So do you think it's doing that, sort of changing the way people think about how to express themselves? They have to be really good with one-liners or zingers? Or
If that's important to you. I'm a big believer in creativity through constraint. So, when you limit the canvas size,
Yeah.
you get more creative.
Yeah.
A lot of creativity comes through hard times and constrained times. And it really, kind of makes you strive to be your best.
That's a great point.
At the same time, it's also about these small details and small aspects of life, and we don't want to forget about those. That they don't have to be beautiful haikus or very pithy comments to be valuable to someone.
Sure.
So that's where the flexibility of the network really comes in, technology, and something we always want to be open to.
I don't know. Are there any Twitter poets out there?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Who has the biggest following on Twitter?
Barack Obama.
Really? How many?
The last time I checked, it was over 40,000.
Wow.
I haven't checked recently, but it may be more than that.
Who's next? That's pretty good.
That's a close one. I'm not sure. It might be Robert Scoble or Jason Calacanis.
Those guys are pretty prolific and active. They're good messengers.
Yeah.
They interact a lot. Okay, well, thank you so much, Jack. Thank you for sharing with us how consumers are changing their behavior online, and certainly Twitter is playing a big role in how people are changing their behavior, their online behavior. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Jack Dorsey. He's the co-founder and CEO of Twitter. I'm Bambi Francisco.